good evening. People here. I've also been joined online. It's nice people are joining us who couldn't be here in person. So, full room here, about another 60 to 80 people online as well. There's the interest people have in this topic. Daniel Gordon from University of Hull. So tonight, looking at the post office scandal, reports of ethics. I'll share the ethics specialist group here in the BCS. So various slides we'll talk about that group a little bit, with things we've done, and lead into the experiences from Lee Castleton. We've heard of Lee and Lisa from the post office scandal. You saw the ITV programme. You've seen Will Miller playing Lee in that. We've also got Cal Finders here from Computer Weekly. I'll explain him later on as well. So tonight, speaking staff schedule, it's a bit flexible. So to allow people to get here, those arrive late, there'll be rather refreshments till now. So welcome from me. Rob Berry, who's sat here at the front, he'll be talking later on. Introduces those after Lee and listen to the Q&A. So linking with things the ethics group have done about living high stakes technologies. So we did a report last year as the ethics specialist group. We looked at the impact of IT, positive and negative, and we linked in with the Horizon scandal as part of that. That kind of complements the input today from Lee. I guess present insights from Lee, talking about his experiences as someone at the sharp end of where IT systems have gone wrong. Q&A after that with Lee and also Cal Finders from Computer Weekly, lead reporter. And he was this is the Horizon scandal since 2010. Directly. And then at the end, we've got refreshments and networking about 8 o'clock. There should be pizza arriving. So with pizza, tea, coffee, I think wine as well, and alternate drinks. So a chance at the end to chat, discuss, and look at ways forward. So that's a bit from me about that. So then I think Alistair Revel, do you want to talk a bit about just this point, and then
I'm happy whenever you.
Yeah, I'll take over with the
Throwing in the deep end rapidly. Right, yeah, so I'm Alistair Revel. I'm the current president of BCS, and I just wanted to say some words about the whole issue, really. So, I mean, I'm thinking it was a few months ago, Rob rang me up and sort of first approached me and said, I think that Lee and Lisa might be willing to actually talk to us at the BCS. And I jumped at the opportunity because I think it's extremely important to actually hear firsthand what has happened and the human impact and the misery, I suspect. Because it's important to understand. I think it will, by listening, we will be galvanized into more action, and our resolve will be steeled somewhat more to continue with the work that we have committed ourselves to try and avoid this sort of thing happening again in the future. I think, therefore, I'm extremely grateful to Lisa and Lee for coming down from Yorkshire today to talk to us. And I think that's really, really important. And I'm very grateful. And I'm sure everyone in the room and online will be extraordinarily grateful too. But I think it's important to stress that while there is an IT system at the heart of the scandal, it's not actually entirely all about IT. There were a lot of other professions which were implicated, and what we see is a massive systemic failure of all sorts of things which have led to what is now known as the post office scandal. And Carl, who sort of, I think, probably first started unearthing it, Carl, maybe a few decades ago.
Yeah, Computer Weekly 2008, really.
Yeah, so
the
time.
Pretty good, but Alan Bates was the first person to contact 2004, but the reason we took it up better was when more than one person contacted. Yeah. So Lee was the second person to contact us. So really, Lee triggered our investigation.
Because I remember sort of reading an article, probably one of the first articles you wrote about it, that long ago, and it's been, I thought, an open secret for a long time. But
I didn't write the first one. That was Rebecca Thompson. I took over the year later when she left. I didn't do the first one.
I just vaguely remember reading it. So,
I didn't want to take credit for it.
So I think my point is that there are a lot of professions which have actually been implicated. It's not just an IT thing. And I think one of the things I'm actually quite proud about what this institute has done is that back at the beginning of September, we sort of summit around the whole Post Office Horizon thing. We invited the sort of normal stakeholder professional bodies and others to come in actually to this building. And we started to unpack some of the findings which were coming out of the inquiry, and we were sort of discussing how would we move forwards from that. And I'm expecting in the next few weeks for a joint declaration from the professional bodies which have the most skin in the game, if I can use that expression, about what our common approach will be. So I think it's important that we're actually convening that. So I just want to also touch on a couple of things that I think are important. They're relatively random, but I think they're significant factors from unpacking the story. They're not necessarily the three factors I'm going to talk about, but I think the first one is that I find it unbelievable that still boards don't have any IT representation. In many cases, it's often a tier below. And I think that was potentially the problem at the post office. The people at the top board were not actually asking the right question. And that, unfortunately, is something that I see with many other boards. We had a CIO network meeting here a couple of weeks ago where CIOs were talking about it. Some sit on the board, but quite a few don't. And it keeps them up at night because they know the stuff which is going wrong and potentially the issues, but they feel that their board is disconnected. So I think there's a big problem with governance and board composition. And I was interested to see that one of the groups which were in this room, the Institute of Directors, has recently updated their code of practice or code of conduct. And I think that is actually quite significant and partly a response to Horizon. So we're beginning, as professional bodies, I think we're beginning to start trying to address this. The second thing, which I should look in the direction of Sam De Silva, who's here somewhere, because I think one of the other things that needs fixing is the presumption in English law that computer evidence is actually almost infallible, incontrovertible. And I think that's a big issue, because I think what you're going to tell us, Lee, is that had a profound impact on your circumstances and your colleagues' circumstances. And, you know, we need to move on that. And I know we have been lobbying and challenging that issue. And I think that is an important thing, because I think that caused a lot of the misery. And this institute can certainly bring some leverage to that as a Royal Charter body. And the third thing, which touches on something which is quite close to my heart, for those of you who know, my presidential theme is actually on chartered and professional registration. And I think it is really important that we actually start seeing widespread and large-scale adoption of chartered and professional registrations in IT. It's a well understood and established concept in other much more mature professions who've probably gone through similar grief at some point in their development. Now, I think, is the time actually for computing, IT, digital, whatever we want to call ourselves, to actually start taking that seriously. I think, you know, we can't really continue to be a Wild West type profession. We've got to sort of sharpen up our game. So I'm actually going to draw a line under what I'm saying here, because I think it's actually far more important to hear from Lee and Lisa their story rather than me babbling on here. So I'm going to hand back to Neil, who will continue sort of hosting.
Thanks, Alistair. Yeah, so I thought set off with tonight a little bit about the ethics group as well, some things we looked at, and then lead on to the contribution. The time's a bit flexible, so we'll see how it's going. So the ethics specialist group, part of BCS, we have a committee of about 12 people, about 150 members of BCS, so part of the ethics group. We do a variety of activities to try and raise the talking of ethics in the BCS and more widely. So last year we did a survey of members. I'll talk about that in a moment. So I'm based again up in Yorkshire. So I'm going to be a Yorkshire theme tonight. We've gone from Hull in East Yorkshire. Rob, who's usually later on, he's from nearby Bridlington, North East Yorkshire as well. And it's North Yorkshire to Scarborough. So Yorkshire's taking over BCS tonight. If anyone could have a train something today for to meet here in London. So I'm part of the University of Hull. I've taught computer science for about 25 years now. I'm involved with ethics. Actually, when our courses failed to get accredited because of a lack of explicit ethical content. So I went to a workshop with BCS we're running about ethics in computing. Something I've come across before, and we thought about making it more explicit. That kind of got me then in teaching ethics, how we teach it, how we contextualize it. And over time, importance of what we do as computer scientists, IT professionals, as part of my teaching role, and other things I do in research as well. And more recent years, I got involved with the ethics specialist group. I took over that group 2 years ago, which again is one of the important things we do at the BCS. And it underpins, as I was saying, things like our code of conduct, basically an ethical code of conduct. But be clear, I think, what we mean by that sometimes. So one thing we did as a specialist group was to look at the applications of technology. So its use development, looking at how we can build that trust in IT systems. And again, something I think we'll hear from Lee's story can be undermined by things we see in media. Last year, we did a survey of the BCS members. So 50,000 plus members were asked to do a survey about the ethical experiences they had in their experience as practitioners. So my colleague Adam from committee, he's back tonight. He can talk to you as well. I was one of the co-authors of a report we did on the outcome of that. We had over 20 members actually answered this. So it's quite a big proportion of BCS membership came back to us, and wants to highlight some of the needs we have in the sector and beyond, as we'll get from Lee's story. Got a few highlights of the report here. The QR code to each report, so you can find it if you search the BCS website. Interesting that most participants of the survey, looking at self-selecting, 88% of these 1,300 people felt that we should take a lead in the UK in shaping global ethical standards. You will hear this from Lee's story later on, why that matters. It's not just a conceptual thing, it impacts people's lives. Also about the fact that people thought about the ethics of companies affects if you work for them or not, what we do with them. Get just reports to organisations as to why your ethical credentials matter. One thing we're looking at in the specialist group is could we do things like certify organisations in terms of ethical standards as well. So some committee members looking at maybe professional mechanisms to audit companies. Can you say an ethical company? What does that mean? 80% of our respondents felt that companies should publish their ethical policies on things like the use of AI and other technologies. And again, it's really important now we see generative AI is like altering what people are doing, how they work, the content is appearing, and companies should be transparent about their use of that. Also, that professional technologists should demonstrate their credentials. So 81% of respondents felt that we should be looking at demonstrating that. So maybe more explicitly, even just saying, well, I'm a BCS member, what's that mean? How do you then evidence, but you are acting in an ethical or moral way? And what does that even mean? So this is where it becomes hard interpretations of what it means to be ethical, what we need to do right. We asked our members, what do you think? Have you come across ethical challenges in your workplace? So, well, 70% probably hadn't. Maybe 1 in 5 said yes, they have met ethical challenges as practitioners in IT in the workplace. Usually about 12% weren't sure, which shows there's issues sometimes. It's an ethical issue. If I do this thing, is it right or wrong? Is that an ethical choice I'm making? Again, so these things are not black and white, unfortunately. They often are these grey areas down to interpretation. What we're looking at in the ethics group is how can we help people with guidance and support. The BCS have a range of professional courses you can do. There's a digital certificate in ethical IT practitioner. Things like AI, a certificate in Yeah, we're building AI you can do as part of the BCS. There are ways you can start to get information about this and evidence it yourself, because people are facing these ethical challenges. Sometimes it's hard to know what to do. As members, I think it's important that we present our commitment to ethical standards, for example, through certification in technology ethics. And again, you see this sort of profile. Half thought it's very important, 50% thought it's important, 40% were sort of middle of the road. Only 5% of respondents thought it wasn't important at all, or had little importance. It's really positive to see that practitioners do think this is an important topic. We should be giving people a way to demonstrate their commitment, their credentials, and ethical choices and ethical behaviours. Here's a free text to ask people again of experiences. And again, these are maybe more concerning, maybe echo some things that Lee talked about in his experience as a user. First, our members, how the organisation support you in raising and managing ethical issues. And again, these are some anonymous quotes from people, so we haven't validated the comments, but I think they reflect what many of us would think, yeah, that's not surprising. I can believe that comment. For example, my employer listened to ethical concerns, if they've supported of that potential concern, and we put in place controls to manage that ethical situation. That's good practice. Ideally, what organisations should do. However, more comments, things like organisations didn't listen. Well, if individuals manage it themselves. So it gets more concerning. Some people found they've got peer support, talk with colleagues. That might be what many of us do initially. When you show up to do something, I'm facing this challenge, what do I do about this? But many comments from all along the lines of organisations did listen, only did it either suppressed the comments or paid lip service to it. The common theme was the messages were received, understood, and ignored. So people said it, and their line manager listened to them, and it was filed away and never seen again. Or worse still, it said they were reprimanded for raising this issue. Again, that shows that culture issue, organisational issue. Organisations that aren't acting in ethical ways, but doing things that hopefully, I guess, it's self-setting group, but as we'd say, that's the wrong thing to do. That's not the way it should be happening. Again, we'll hear, I think, from Lee, organisation that's done just that. Our report for the BCS is a white paper. You can download it from the BCS website. Recommendations for the UK government, bodies like the BCS, employers and individuals. Got a few of the recommendations here just to summarise that. So what have we said for professional bodies like the BCS? So the analysis benefit, support training and accreditation options so people can evidence these credentials. The BCS has that partly already. We have, say, the ethical IT practitioner badge you can get as a digital badge for free. You can pay to a certification to build AI. I did that as part of a trial of it last year. To meet with a lot of London afterwards as one of the people who trialled that scheme. Again, it's interesting to see the case studies it gave you. Really think about, it's a good way to actively engage with these sort of issues and think about them. Look about industry-wide standards and guidance. So organisations can become ethical. There's a lot of push for this in many aspects now of things like sustainability, carbon zero, ethical activity and ethical IT practice through parts of that guidance. I'll look at about other practitioners around the world. There's EU ICT Ethics guidance now. The ACM, British Computing Machinery in America, have a very strong ethical code of conduct. So there's things maybe as the BCS we can learn from and strengthen our own approach to supporting our members in their ethical activity. As practitioners, those who are working in IT, we ensure that our professional development includes ethical concerns. So what are the issues? AI is a big one these days. The rise and scale itself is a good illustration of where these things matter, what problems you can get. Look how we strengthen our own specialist knowledge, that commitment to our own CPD to show how we are improving what we can do as practitioners in an ethical way. Also, as part of BCS, contribute to our development of ethical standards and practices. In the ethics specialist group, one big thing we're looking at, how we can help promote that. With case study examples, reports like this one. and subject expertise to ensure that there's a wider public understanding of this in terms of ethics of AI and wider digital technologies. I think the whole issue of generative AI itself has got a whole new range of ethical challenges: fake news, hallucination of results, faking content. See that thing of the elections in the UK and America recently, concerns about the abuse of these systems, and the public absorb them, not appreciating the dangers. Just for say, just illustrate some examples from my own teaching. I wonder if this is a live Menti question, but I'd say this to my students. I've been teaching ethics now for, say, 20 years. Give a practice analysis on some software that can take some inputs from a sensor in a car, wheel rotation. This time, is it really moving or not? The front rear wheels aren't moving in sync. You know, it's not on a rolling road, it's not on a railroad. At that point, you can decide to alter the engine management to reduce nitrogen oxygen output. Why do that? But it's used to avoid emissions controls in systems like the EU, Britain, and America. So you can choose a scenario. You write software. You write software that whistleblow about it. You refuse to write software, but maybe get sacked, or do you refuse and resign? So that's a scenario. So I was going to do a Menti quiz tonight, but I won't run that for now. Over to my students. I teach about ethics and IT, so the answers you get is sometimes hopefully better than you might expect in the general developers community. So around this last week, so one of our students will still write software and forget about it. So he'll take his money and forget about it. Interestingly, 10 of them said they'd write software but whistleblow. So I point out to them that in writing the software, you're killing people. Pollution isn't just there for the sake of it, it's because pollution kills people. Asthma attacks in big cities kills individuals. You're killing people by writing the software. You want to do that? But 11 of them would do it, which is a challenge. 2 of them would refuse and face dismissal. The same with the company. They say, well, the company isn't ethical, but I still work for it. And 3 of them said they'd refuse and resign. So again, what about in here now? Hopefully, by being self-selective, we'd be much more towards the right-hand side. Still a scenario I've done again the last few years. So that's the Volkswagen scandal. Read about that if you want to see the details of it. It's a real case, real people being killed by our software. Another one, with an IT provider, develops an accounting system to support users. However, you're going to regularly fix bugs in it, manually fix errors. Database behind it is wrong, fixing it manually. You discover at the end that some end users have been disciplined, so it is sacked because of these bugs and manipulation. You work for that company, ignore it. What you asked, what is happening? Whistleblow, refuse and resign, or refuse to face dismissal, or refuse and resign. So I hope you recognise that scenario. It's in tonight. My students were still that sort of proportion, similar behaviour. One of them, I imagine it's the same student, would still do it. He likes his money, he's happy to do that. Again, in computer courses, 80% male. In my courses, it's about 95% 18 to 21-year-old. They have a very laissez-faire approach to morality and what you can and can't do. So either of them will still do what's happening and plan to whistleblow. But 2 of them are more pretty ethical. They'd refuse to do it, but say that company. And one of them, the same person as before, would refuse to resign. So that's people's responses. So these are, again, they are scenarios. If anything, in this sort of made-up scenario, it's easier to move to the right. You're not giving up your salary, you're not giving up your house, you're not getting sacked. These are the things that we face. That's a Horizon scandal, to say. We don't have that on the news, or could be a weekly. Why am I interested in their courses? Well, because computing, what I believe in, what I teach, my career is in teaching computer science. Equally, it's not always great in the media. Killer software, Boeing 737 MAX, software goes wrong, planes crash. Misuse of content for fake media, affecting things like the London mayor elections, UK general election, American election. Loss of data, all a range of things where IT is perceived as being negative. And by making more ethical choices and demonstrating an ethical profession, we can hopefully address that. So next steps for the ICT Ethics Group, well, we're leading this area hopefully still. Working with organisations now, international groups, so the ACM, IFFM, International Federation of Information Processing, we're working with them as well. Next month, I'll advertise this now, it's the 5th of December, we have our AGM. That includes a more general meeting. You're welcome to join as a webinar. That's going to have Georgina Halford Hall, the Whistleblowers UK, talking about whistleblowing in the UK and the impacts on IT professionals. It may be following on from what we heard from Lee in a moment. Usually the opportunities to whistleblow potentially and why that's a challenge and how that can be supported. Do join us for that event. If you check on the BCS events page, it sounds about as well. It's just a webinar, so you don't need to travel to London for that one. So that was then my whistleblowing tour of ethics and computing, ethics group. So it's on schedule, it's slightly ahead of time. I'll hand over to Lee Castleton now. What his experiences? You're familiar with Lee, he was a former postmaster. By the Horizon scandal. They made famous or infamous by the ITV programme. So I'll hand over to you, Lee. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name's Lee Castleton and I'm a former sub-postmaster. We're going to roll back 20 years and I'm just going to talk in general terms about how this moved forward, what happened to my family and where we are now. And then I'm going to open the floor and we'll discuss anything, you know, the topics are completely open. So if you want to ask me anything, ask away. Very open and very happy to answer anything. So it all began 20 years ago. In 2003, my wife and I had two children, 6 and 8 million CJ. And I was working as a stockbroker down here in Westferry in Canary Wharf. I'd served 9 years in the Royal Air Force as a aircraft electrical engineer. And life was good. I had no mortgage. I was 35 years old. We had a lovely house in the country. But we were looking for something better, something happier, something more family oriented. And so we decided to do more business. And we found a post office right on the seafront in Bridlington. I mean, couldn't get much better. A regular salary, nice property, beachfront, beautiful 2 children, it would be fantastic. We sold our house and paid £300,000 for Marine Drive post office. If only I'd knew then, now, my life would have been very different. Everything was perfect for the first 6 months. We took over in July and everything balanced. Everything's just wonderful. The kids were enjoying the beach life. My wife was enjoying, you know, the work life balance, really. We were together, which was wonderful. And everything was just fantastic until December 2003. So we had a misbalance of £1,103.18. We've not had a misbalance before. Everything had been perfect. And I went through all of the requirements the post office tell you have to do, which is telephone the helpline. They will tell you what you need to do. You work through their questions and hopefully you find whatever's gone wrong. I mean, £1,103 is going to be easy to find. I went through all of those checks for hours and hours and hours, and we just could not find what had gone wrong. It didn't make any sense. We'd had no problems during the week. We'd had no issues at all. But they kept telling me that whatever happens, you need to put this money back in because you're responsible for it. Your contract tells you that you are responsible. So I put in the £1,100. The following week, £4,230. We continued to misbalance for 12 weeks. sometimes we had too much money. Mostly we had too little money. No matter how many hours we spent looking and looking and looking through reams and reams of paper, we just couldn't find out why. It made no sense. Nobody could answer any questions. Nobody seemed interested. I was just told repeatedly, just pay the money. You're doing something wrong, it'll come back. Don't worry about it. How can you not worry about it? You know, the impact is so terrible. I spent hours and hours and hours on the phone. Over the whole 12 weeks, I made 91 telephone calls, some of them for 3 hours. You know, I would swap from ear to ear to ear with this aching, ringing in my ears, trying to get to the bottom of it, and begging people at the other end of the phone to help me. I knew after 3 weeks that what was going on, what was affecting this thing, this horizon system, or my office, or me. Maybe it was me. Maybe I was just doing something completely wrong. Needed a second set of eyes, and I needed to get somebody else involved. So I asked the post office for an audit, because I knew that once the auditors came in, it would open the pathway for other people to look. I had nothing to hide. There was nothing in my, even in my mind that I needed to think. I was really worried over it. I was very happy for anyone to scrutinise anything that I'd done. And I actually hoped that I'd done something stupid. And whatever that stupidity was, it would just sort itself out and we'd be all happy again. That never happened. What actually happened was the auditors came in and I was suspended straight away. And people told me that I needed to make this money good because I owed it. And that the post office wanted that money. No matter what I did and what I argued with, I would produce reams of paper and go through this paperwork, showing all the differences from one piece of paper to another. Maybe where I told them how many stamps there were this particular week that then came back as not being there, and all these little differences, constant little differences throughout the weeks. All that paperwork I would send away to have analysed, openly believing that someone was looking at that paperwork and they were going to come back to me with an answer. Never happened. What actually happened was that paperwork disappeared. It was never seen again. And all they would do was produce the cash accounts, the weekly cash accounts, which is a little bit like a statement at the end of the week. And they keep saying to me that this needs paying. This needs paying. This progressed then to letters, the dreaded letters. You need to pay it. If you don't pay us within 14 days, we'll do this. And all this time I wasn't earning anything. I'd been removed from the office and there was a temporary in charge. We were now in a situation where we had a mortgage that we couldn't pay. We had no income because I was not allowed to work in the office. And I had a debt that we just couldn't pay. They decided that they were going to take me to county court and recover their money. At the time I had legal insurance, which paid for a solicitor to represent me. We went to Scarborough County Court, and they never turned up. They never arrived. And I never realised how significant that was at the time. I never really realised. I thought, yay, they've realised, finally realised and understood. I haven't taken any money. There's nothing here that I've done wrong, and therefore they've realised and decided to drop the case. No. What they actually decided to do was to take it to the High Court and raise the stakes, make a huge statement to all the other 18,000 offices out there. They wanted to make it so they don't do what Lee Castleton's done. Don't even think about it because we'll just crush you. It took 2 years to get to High Court. Can't tell you how difficult those 2 years were. My dog was spat at in the street. People would shout from one side of the street that I was a thief. I'd stolen pension money from poor people. People, gosh, it was so difficult. You can't protect your family. You can't protect from half-truths, from things being said that are absolutely abhorrent by the post office, even though they knew it wasn't true. I'd asked them the day of the audit, the police to be involved, because I knew I hadn't taken anything. And they told me there's no need for the police to be involved. It's our money and you owe it. If somebody tells you they haven't taken any money and they want the police to be involved because they've got nothing to hide, any right-minded person would look for the culprit. But they already knew. They already had the answers. It was a very, very, very lonely place. By the time we got to November of 2006, I couldn't afford any more legal cover. We'd run completely out of money, and the court was coming very rapidly. I knew that in December I was going to go to court. I knew that I had to do my very, very best to try and put a case out in front of a judge that he could understand, that he could grasp the technicalities of what I was trying to, you know, I didn't have that technical expertise. I didn't have a legal expertise, but I knew that I hadn't taken any money, and I knew that there was no money missing. I just wanted somebody to listen to me, just hear me. It's a very, very lonely place being judged, a very lonely place, and I've never felt more alone in my life. What the barrister did was what this was. Rather than fronting out the fact that the system worked perfectly, it was a lot easier to make an argument or a statement of account. It's a very old law. It's tried and tested in many courts. It's actually had now a precedent that's been set. It was very, very difficult for me to overturn, because in 1997, we've heard, the law changed. And the law changed because of people like the post office, because they said that it's really expensive when people go to court to provide all the technical information, all the outline of a system is huge. And really, if we say it's working, it's working. So they reversed the burden of proof on me. And I needed then to provide a technical argument against a technically qualified person to say that the system wasn't working in my office. In effect, it was impossible. I didn't realize that. But it became unsurmountable. It was never, ever going to happen. I was never going to win. It'd probably take me 15 years to realize that. Because you're innocent, right? It's proven guilty. Not on that day. Not on that day for Lee Castleton. The judgment was handed down in January 2007, and I lost on it every single time. It completely changed our lives. It's the most crushing thing that I could ever think of. Not because of the money. I didn't care about the money. It's about so much more. It's about your reputation, the way you live your life. Everything that about you that makes you you was crushed. My wife suffered terribly. She became so anxious she would have seizures. My daughter has fought for 10 years against an eating disorder, because that was the only thing that she could control in her life. Can you imagine being just a teenager and the only thing that you can control in your life is what you eat? It touched every single part of our lives. Every single part. we were the only one. That's what they'll tell us. You're the only one that's having issues. You're the only one that's having losses. By 2007, the end of 2007, Computer Weekly, I often think to myself, they must have, oh, this guy is crazy. They advertised the opportunity for people, lay people to have computer help. They've got lots of UK students that are studying computer science, and they'd love to help people with their computer problems. So Lee Castleton comes along with these huge spreadsheets for Jitsi with lots of technical data on there that I just didn't understand. The first conversation I had with this very, very nice PhD student from Portugal was quite a doozy, to be fair, bless him. I bet he wondered, what is this guy talking about? But what that did was open the door to a guy called Tony Collins. He was the editor at Computer Weekly at the time. He's got form, to be fair, because he's fought lots of times. He was involved in the Chinook inquiry that where the MOD was blaming some pilots for a pilot error, and they found it was an electronic computer software issue. So he was outing things that were being covered up, problems in computers. And he must have seen something from Alan's letter. Alan had written a year prior, and my letter, and he decided he was going to give my letter to a lady called Rebecca Thompson. She was very new to the business. She was newly qualified, and it was probably one of the very first pieces that she wrote in any depth. And again, I would spend hours on the phone, very emotional, as I am, explaining all of these things that happened to me and all the differences that I'd found in this computer system and all these things that nobody was listening to. And it led on to a story that laid out the same things for 8 people. And that was the first time that I wasn't the only one. I never met the other 8 people. Well, the household names now, to be fair. They're wonderful people. Alan, bless him, Sir Alan, decided we should all meet. It was really important to each one of us to see each other. And he, being Alan, decided that the exact same distance for everyone to travel was a place called Fennycolt, and that's where we all descended on one Sunday morning. And the room was probably no bigger than this. Wooden floor, typical village hall. Alan had laid out chairs in a circle, hoping that there was going to be quite a number of us, and about 20 were there. That was the first time. I can't tell you how uplifting it is to not be the only one anymore. And from there, the JFSA grew. It grew so much that we had to move to a place called Kinnerton because the room wasn't big enough. And the only one, the 8, became 20, became 50, became 100. Been quite a journey. What that gave us was lots of shared experiences, the strength of the group. We became so strong, so directional as well, so focused on where we wanted to be and what we wanted to achieve and how we were going to achieve that. And what that also gave us was an impetus to start to push back. We've been on the defensive foot all the way through. And it was just that point where things started to push back. Joe Hamilton had this wonderful MP at the time, who's now a Lord Arbuthnot veteran, absolutely phenomenal man, a wonderful listener and a real proper person, just a human being, a real human being. And he listened and he listened and he listened and he decided that he was going to do something. And so he raised the matter in the House and pushed and pushed and put people in awkward situations, difficult situations, until he finally got a crack of light, which was for Post Office to actually look at the IT system and see what was going on. See why we as a group had these issues and why they acted in the way they'd acted. And they brought all on board another fantastic pair of people, which were Second Sight, Paul Warmington and Ian Henderson, who just travelled along this line of no sides. All I want is facts. Tell me what you want me to look at, and I'll look at it. And if it's true, well, hey, if it's not, I'll tell you. Very direct people. It was just what we needed. It was so refreshing to actually be engaged with somebody, for somebody to actually listen, but actually be able to understand and move forward. And many, many, many people would not have done what they did, which was search for the truth. Alan talks about the search for truth and forcing the truth out of the post office. But without these people along the way, we would still be talking in a village hall about how we to move forward. These people, these real proper people, made it all happen. It's so important in life to recognize those real people and recognize how much they do. Just in a daily work, just doing what they do. And that was pivotal to the group, because what Arbuthnot actually did, put them in a situation for post office that they couldn't walk away. And it allowed us to gather more and more evidence through a mediation scheme. The post office buried. As soon as they knew that this wasn't going their way, they threw a load of money at it and buried it, made it impossible to complete because they didn't like the answers. But thankfully, the group of MPs that had grown and grown and grown decided that that wasn't the right answer and that wasn't good enough. And they weren't going to let people walk away and say, we've done our bit. They wanted real answers from real people. So what they did was collect huge amounts of paperwork. And this huge amounts of paperwork then opened the door for Threaths to look at doing a GLO. The GLO itself, in its infancy, consisted of about 100 people. We needed to find more than 500. Alan convinced people. It's very convincing, very, very, very convincing. And what he did was manage to get people to listen in the wider audience. So in the post office itself, the post office actually advertised for people that had issues with the software to come forward. And instantly the group grew from 140 to 500 plus. And that's where we got to the 555. So by the time we were able to put together the litigation case, the group had grown from just the only one, 8, went to 555. Priest fought a wonderful battle. A wonderful battle because they had so much information. They had so much paperwork, so much detail, so many questions to ask that had never been answered. So many times that things have been said in court that then looked questionable. Technical people that knew better would half answer questions or not answer questions or answer a question with another question. There was no reality there. There was no understanding of the humanity, the ethical, moral standing that they should have taken. By the time we got to the 6th judgment in GLO, which was quite a journey. Quite a journey because post office spent millions and millions of pounds trying to stop the truth coming out. They tried to crush the whole thing in court. Taxpayers' money, fully funded. The whole bill was over £100 million, £150 million. Try and stop the truth coming out. In fact, they even tried to recuse the judge. They asked the judge to step away from the case because he was biased. He was only biased because he was finding for us and not for them. And they didn't like it. They paid a lawyer £1 million to ask him to remove himself from the case. The judge's judgments were so damning. He came with phrases like the Flat Earth Society, a Victorian workhouse owner's ethics. You know, these were strong judgments, very strong judgments. What the post office did was forced through money, spending millions and millions of pounds. They just outspent us and forced us to settle. We settled for 57.7 million, 555 people. By the time the costs were removed from that £46 million, it led to about £20,000 each. The group post office wouldn't settle with 93 people that had convictions. We removed them from the case. Allenby and Allen, very fairly, they'd started the journey with us, and therefore it was important to make sure that everyone saw something. And every single member of the 555 received their share, irrespective. Post office even tried to stop that. That then allowed, thankfully, the Hamilton judgment, which was the overturning of the convictions. It started with 6 in the Crown Court that overturned some 6 cases, and then 39 in the High Court, in the Court of Appeal, which was one of Hamilton. And it was really, really important for that to change. From that judgment day, the way that we were listened to, the way we were engaged with, everybody was refreshed. It allowed us to put pressure, huge pressure on the government to do something properly for the group. They initially started, Paul Scully started with an inquiry that wasn't statutory, and then became statutory through pressure, huge amounts of pressure, before he allowed that to happen. And that then allowed the inquiry to then really look into what went on, really look at how people reacted and how people acted, what they did, how they did it, and why they did it. Unbeknown to everybody, including the inquiry, the post office had shredding advice. So years before the inquiry even came about, they'd taken legal advice, and part of that advice from one of their chief investigators, shred anything that you think you would not like to be read out in court. Don't write an email. Nothing must be written unless you include a legal person on the CC list, because then we don't have to disclose it. And if you do write it, don't write it in a way that you wouldn't want it read out in court. These were open conversations in the company. This is the way the post office worked. This is the way they thought they'd whitewash everything. In the inquiry, we've seen people, real learned people, very intelligent people, telling us how inept they are because they missed this or they missed that, or they can't remember. Or, no, I didn't say that. I might have written that, but I didn't mean that. I know it sounds terrible now, not like a day. When I wrote it, I never meant that. It was just, there was no animosity to anybody. I didn't want to crush anybody. I didn't want to tell anybody that they were liars and thieves. I never meant to write that. The planning and spreading advice war. When I, as you all well know, when I write an email to somebody and I CC 10 people in. You need to make sure that all those 10 people get the shredding advice as well. So it's quite impressive when you see Jason Beer or one of the other guys asking questions about an email that the person on the stand actually thinks they've shredded and got rid of. But somebody who was CC'd outside the company retained it. Yeah, quite interesting. So the inquiry is going to listen to closing submissions on the 16th, 17th December. And then we're looking forward to Sir Win Williams, who's been absolutely fantastic and so knowledgeable, so understanding, and really well briefed. And the way that the witnesses have been dealt with by the whole team, but in particular Jason Beer, has been a refreshing eye-opener for all of the group. Because we really did think that it was just going to be really, you know. Interesting to see what he said. But there was lots of things that we never knew. Even going through court, even you know, from Fraser's judgment, who was amazing in High Court, and you know, I take my hat off to people that are able to piece together technical information with legal information and put that all together in a real life scenario, because that's what he did. You can see, he can talk on the technical level and on the legal level in such a wonderful way that we're blessed to have him as a judge, really. And we were very lucky. We've been very lucky in the last 20 years. I know it sounds quite an odd thing for somebody who's traveled these 20 years to say, but I'm lucky. This could have been the end of me. But it hasn't been. This could have been the end for so many of our group. But it hasn't been. But what's happening now is the dragging out, the delay in the schemes that are supposed to give us justice, the start of a new life, the schemes that are designed in a way to be difficult and awkward and complicated and adversarial, that have been presented to victims that have just gone through 20 years of difficulty and adversarial life. You know, it's disgusting. Well, they don't know us, do they? Because we'll just continue to fight and fight and fight and fight until all 555 and what's left of us, bless us, because we're losing people terribly through old age. Get to the end of this journey. And the accountability is the important, you know, whomever or wherever this journey takes us. It's a little bit, I was talking to a room of lawyers, I would say, reputation. Yeah. Reputation about what you do and how you do it, how you interface with people, and knowing that you can look back on these 20 years and say, I did the right thing in the right way, for the right reasons. It's very important, isn't it? Imagine Paula Venel's reputation 20 years ago. All those years of building the reputation within the church and business in such a way. To now look at it, how it's been tarnished. Post office's reputation, 300 years. 300 years in the building. And just one group of executives. You know, people are talking about giving it away. How hard earned is your reputation? How hard is it to get to the end of a journey, life, to retire and look back? And look at what Paul Reynolds is looking at, or Gareth Jenkins, or any of those executives on the board. What's that? How does that equate for people? You know, life's hard, isn't it? But it's the hardest lesson you learn. Is that one time when you could have stepped up and stopped everything one person could have stepped out and said, that's not right. A whistleblower, I'm gonna do this, or one person in the executive could have changed the course of it. You've got legal people, really learned legal people that were mistaken, missed that, never saw that. Oh, God, when you put it to me that way, I understand it now. Never got it. That was 10 years ago, though. Never understood it. The board actually went on the hop for a couple of years during the litigation, so that they didn't have to keep minutes. Because if the board goes out on the road, the post office, they don't have to keep minutes. So they can talk about anything, not minute it. You know, to stand there and pretend to be so inept. Gosh, I'm so sorry. It's that one. It's all about reputation. Anyway. Is there anything?
So I'm Rob Derry. I'm a former executive director at BCS, and before that, I've been a main board director, non-exec director, and chair of some very large organisations going all the way back to 1990. And I can honestly say, out of the hundreds, if not thousands, of presentations I've sat through and listened, I've never experienced anything like that. You talked to Lee there about, and we've all experienced it in a micro way, the computer says no kind of syndrome. And we all know how that feels like when you just can't get through stuff. You give me a sense of times that by 1,000,000 is what you go through. And also my thought, myself and my wife Jane, we live in Bridlington, very near Lee's post office. And my mind went back to 20 years ago or so, and our children are the same age, roughly the same ages. And Jane used to take the children to a swimming pool outside. Remember the swimming pool outside the front? And I was kind of thinking, your children were going through hell, and ours were kind of, sorry, I'm getting a bit emotional myself. Yeah, just thinking about that, but well done. I think we're going to have a bit of a Q&A now, and we've got Carl, who you heard Lee talk about. So Carl, if you could come up at the front and put yourself forward. I know you love answering loads of difficult questions. Lee, if you sit there as well. And where do you want me to then? And we'll take a few questions from people. I mean, maybe start with Carl, just to give Lee a little bit of a breather.
Not as good as him.
Ah,
I just
God,
want to say,
you won't have
we've,
any more, will you?
we've got whole Bridlington and Scarborough. I'm actually from Newcastle, so I
Okay.
beat them all.
All right, yeah, the furthest.
But I haven't come from there today.
The furthest.
Yeah, I'm more northern
Oh.
than you.
I thought when you kind of, what was the trigger? Let me ask a first question. What was the trigger for, when did you realise, bloody hell, there's something really going on here? It's not just a few people bleating around stuff. When did it really hit home to you?
For me, what really hit home, we knew there was problems. We knew that. I mean, you go back to 2008, Lee getting in touch, then 2009 when they formed the group. More people were contacting us all the time. People who worked at the post office, an IT person who wasn't there anymore, was involved in the procurement. He phoned me. He said, "Look, Horizon had real problems." These were all big things, but we were all like, "Yeah, there are problems here. It's going to be sorted out." We didn't know the extent of all the stuff that's come out in the inquiry. That we didn't know the extent of it. We didn't know the extent until after the High Court case. So we thought, yeah, this is really big. It's going to be sorted out. They'll say, yeah, there was problems, and they're going to sort it out. But when I realized, oh my God, this is really big, it was 2015. And the mediation which we talked about. So we knew that second side had found that there were major problems. Yeah, people were telling me. And then we were just waiting for it to come out. And then suddenly the post office ended the mediation scheme, and we thought they're not going to release the report. So I did a freedom of information request. And I wrote an article about it, and I got a letter from Jane McLeod, who was their general counsel, like really threatening. And then when you saw the things she was saying about us, we thought, this is what the hell are they trying to say here? They were saying ridiculous things. They were saying things like, I'd never rung them. I'd been ringing them non-stop for years and they weren't answering questions. They said, I described James Arbuthnot as the leader of MPs in the House of Commons campaigning. Said he's not the leader, he's little things like that. Turns out their internal communications, they did describe him as the leader of MPs. And it was so, Brian Blake said to me, right, Carl, look, this is serious. This is pretty bad coming from the general counsel. You just check all the things they've said and react to them then. And at first you're thinking, oh shit, you know, I'm screwed, you know, we're going to be bankrupt or something, you know. And then I went through it and thought, actually, it's not that bad. So we responded to them all. I changed the headline, you know, you got to negotiate a bit. The headline that said they'd sacked Second Sight, which they had, but they were still doing some work for them. So it was like, strictly speaking, it's, you could say they haven't fully sacked them. But now it's talking about they had sacked them. So then I responded to it and they never came back. And from that moment on, I thought I was working it all the time from 2010 when Rebecca left, but I wouldn't say it was one of many stories. I write about financial services, IT, and obviously that was.
Can I just say, just to equate something, when I talk about people that supported us, how many stories are you in?
It's over 500 now.
That's real support. That is real support. Without people like this, without people that are willing to take those kind of letters from GCs, and without the pressure that's been put on them, but to come through the other side and still do what we did, that's real support.
Takes me perfectly onto my next point, because that was the thing that made me angry. And I thought, right, that's it. So from being just, it was probably a side, because financial services was my thing, but obviously the finance crash, the IT, the amount of IT storage. I was writing about, I mean, somebody told me that Lehman Brothers was going to go down 2 weeks before, but obviously I just thought, nah, that's nonsense. Wow. Says, well, they're all talking about it. I said, oh, well, I can't really write that. Can you imagine? Anyway, I didn't write it. Somebody told me that time when Northern Rock went as well. Somebody told me, oh, they're going to stop giving cash and that. I'm like, yeah, right. So anyway, after that, I thought, right, that's it. I'm going to really work a lot more on this. And that year, 2015, was the biggest year for me. It was the Dalmallington error, which was really important because all the time they said there are no errors that can cause a shortfall. And then working with the CW, somebody called Mark Baker, Tim McCormack, Helen Baker, they're not related to Bakers. They'd found a sub-postmaster who was having problems. They had a remote, what's it called when they have a remote one?
Oh, yeah,
like
it's called remote.
Yeah,
So
you have
in
a
vehicle.
you have a post office in the countryside,
So rural.
and you go and serve people in rural places. You go on a van, you have a little computer, and they found out that when the person was, call it remming in and out or something, when they were sending the money,
It's receiving
to the post office, it was on the machine they were on, it was as if it hadn't been sent. So they'd done it numerous times, so did it 3 times. So £3,000 sent, only recorded as being sent once from that machine, but Horizon thought they had it 3 times. Anyway, it sounds really boring, but this was like, wow, that's an error that they wouldn't notice. So we looked into it and got it, and I managed to get an internal email from Atos, who used to do IT support for the post office as well as Fujitsu. And it was somebody saying, Helen Baker, who had sort of smooth talked him, she got to know him, and she got him to say, yeah, we know about that problem, but we're going to fix it next October, 6 months later. And I'm like, wow, that's it. You know, we've got a smoking gun. I thought we've got them. I'm like in the office going, yes, we've got them. This is an error. It causes losses, and we've got them admitting it. And they were like coming back saying, oh yeah, but that didn't cause a loss because we found it. Yeah, because we asked them about it. That's how bad it was.
Wow.
So I just knew, and in that year there was so many stories that year.
One after another.
Just story after story, and more people coming out. IT people worked on it, and it was dreadful. And then we managed to build. I mean, this is what people forget. That was when the GLO was first planned, because there was so much evidence, and that down Mallington there was the remote access.
Yeah.
Then they knew they had a case, and from then it was then building for the GLO. So 2015 for me was the year I thought,
You got to remember,
This is
prior
like
to
huge.
2015, we were blind.
hmm,
We had no remote access because post office wouldn't admit it. We had no bugs, errors or defects in the system because there weren't any. There was no knowledge of them. But we just had a lot of people that had a lot of issues that didn't make sense. And any time that anybody would say, well, this happened, they would just roll it away, wouldn't they?
you just say like
Just didn't.
their answers were like comical. It's like it seemed as if they were like high or something. They were like didn't make sense, but like what can you do? You know, it's like this is ridiculous. Even write the quotes and the thing and
What was they were prepared legally, or armed legally. They would have done whatever it took and have proved over the years that it doesn't matter if they're wrong, they'll do it anyway.
Yeah.
There's no commerciality. They don't think we're going to spend 100 million quid to protect a system that really we're wrong with. It's just 100 million quid, isn't it?
Yeah, question for you. We talked about the legal aspects of it. We're in the BCS, Child Institute for IT. Lots of those people who work at Fujitsu and in the post office IT department are members of BCS. You know, you've met some of them at the inquiry. What was your kind of general view when you've heard what they had to say about their world and why they did what they were doing?
I think it's fair to say there was lots of silos, that people didn't know what other people were doing. And that was purposeful. I know that was purposeful. And I certainly don't bear any grudges. It means nothing to me because I've given 20 years of our lives. If I thought it was personal, I probably wouldn't be here, to be fair. I think it's the only way to survive is to take it outside of that. I just think there's a lot of people that are probably having very sleepless nights. And maybe deservedly, and maybe not deservedly. I don't really know. I wish more people would be more candid. Being candid is something that I just think it's better for society. You know, there's so many people that want to keep a little secret here or a little secret there, that if this had been not right from the beginning, well, certainly our lives would have been different. I hope that they look back on that and how they've reacted and how they've interacted and change whatever they perceive to be their behaviours.
he's a better person than me because I still take it personally what Jane McLeod wrote. She's the one who didn't come to the inquiry. She refused to go to. I was
That's
looking
right.
for her. Yeah. And there's another note because I noticed the reaction about the shredding.
Yeah.
You do know that in recent weeks, they found out that somebody within the post office now told her team or his team to destroy anything that might be of interest in the inquiry.
Wow.
Can you believe it?
Yeah.
Somebody being investigated now. By the net.
Listen, anybody in the audience, if you want to ask a question of the guy, just put your hand up. There.
Lee, with
Maybe
hindsight.
introduce yourself and.
Oh, hi, everyone. I'm Dawn Davidson. I'm here in my capacity as Whistleblowers UK tech lead. So I speak to a lot of tech whistleblowers. But I'm going to ask you what you would do with the benefit of hindsight. What would you do differently?
Not by a post office.
Well, apart from obviously, apart from that.
I'm not. I don't know. I think I sleep at night because I don't see anything I could have done differently. I wish I was brighter. I wish I was cleverer. I wish I could have fought the good fight and, you know, done better in court. But I did everything that I could do. I argued every point. I worked tirelessly. But I do wish I was brighter.
You seem pretty bright to me. Anybody else? Sam, you've always got a legal
Right.
aspect.
Elliot, Sam Silver here. We spoke briefly. I think you touched upon this. I mean, what is extremely disappointing, sad, distressing is that there was not one person in that whole ecosystem who actually sort of said, hey, something's not wrong. Because I think, you know, none of the witnesses have said, oh, I sent this email to so-and-so and, you know, they covered it up. There was no one, I mean, it's not like a cover up. There was no.
Well, it has been sanitized.
Sorry?
It has been sanitized. The evidence given to the inquiry has been sanitized through shredding various other things.
But no one has actually said, look, you know, no one, not a whistleblower, but no one's actually said, is this actually correct? And we've got so many, you know, postmasters who are, who are, you know, who are criminally doing this thing. And it just begs belief that it's not just a post office, that, you know, external lawyers, barristers, accountants, there's a whole lot of profession. Not one of them actually stood up and actually said.
People double down, don't they?
Sorry?
People double down, you know, they just go in, they just pile onto it. And what we-
Organisation, isn't it?
Yeah, and what we've seen in, you know, I'm not by any means a legal person, but one of the themes of the post office is the structure, if you like, with the GC, the lead legal person, quite often being outside the loop, not being always in the centre of things, not always being able to talk about risk. And the way that that came to light in sort of the major part is that Susan Crichton, who was GC through what I like to call the fiddle review, they knew that a person had given false evidence in Crown Court, a technical person from Fujitsu. They knew that what he'd said in court misled the judges, and that potentially led to people being falsely imprisoned, basically. Once they knew that, they had to act. They needed to take that to the board, and the board needed to listen. They needed to listen to the risk of that, and they needed to make a decision as to how they were going to release that information. Not only how they were going to release it, but what they were going to do about it as a company. They had a morality problem, because what they actually did was left the GC outside the room whilst the presentation was being made to the board by a person who wasn't legal, who couldn't understand the risk potentially to the company. And they were happy then for that person to leave the company because she felt so outside of that loop. One of the questions that often comes in my head is, how would I have reacted as the head legal person, the GC, the risk provider? You know, don't do that, it's too risky, don't do that. How would I have reacted when I knew then, from that moment on, that my board didn't want to know about the risk? They didn't want to know about how to make this better. They wanted to cover it up, because they would have had a person in that room and they would have listened to every aspect of the potential risk. They didn't.
So I can't comment on the role of the GC, but what I can comment is, as an external lawyer, so a partner at a law firm, yeah, if my client was instructing me, I have a duty to the court. I've got a duty to represent the client, but if I know that there's something going wrong, I have the overriding duty for solicitor is to the court. So I think a number of those external lawyers deserve to be struck off, frankly. You know, because they can say they were following client instructions,
I
but
think they will.
I hope so.
On a list.
I hope so.
One particular point, there was 9 legals in a room, part of the whitewash, as I call it. Okay, one of which was a law. Yeah. They didn't discuss this particular matter. They forgot about it. Well, that's what they would have the inquiry. There's nothing in the minutes about that particular thing, the false evidence. So you had 9 very high-ranking legals, KCs, barristers, junior partners. They never discussed it. Yeah, well,
Thank you, Lee. Can I ask a question about?
Let's say who you are, Sid.
Sorry, yes, James Evans, I'm part of the Registration and Standards Committee here at the BCS. I'm interested in how we can empower the IT professional on the ground, if you like. I can't remember the exact part of the story, but there was a very junior Fujitsu employee at some point who I think let out the fact that there was remote access to the systems and it was possible to tamper with the data as part of fixing the issues. But that person was clearly terrified for their own safety and job, being attacked by the legal eagles themselves. So clearly whistleblowing within the post office wasn't a trusted route.
Fujitsu, to be fair.
And in Fujitsu. Doesn't seem to me that there's another channel in the country more generally that somebody like that could go to without exposing themselves and effectively being dismissed. But nevertheless lodging the issue in a place where somebody in a position of power and perhaps independence can do something about it. I mean, do you think there's a role for something like that?
There is, in particular, one of the engineers that was actually brought in at the very beginning. So they were having lots of problems with the cash account, particularly in writing. So they wanted to draw all of the account together at the end of a week and produce a cash account that the post office could see and that the postmaster could see. And one of the people that brought in, he was working in Brussels for another company. He worked alongside a couple of the engineers that were at IC at the time. And so they brought him in for a 6-week contract. Come and tell us how bad it is, you know, make your recommendations and we'll deal with it. Very open. Tell us what you think. He did 6 weeks. We told him, like this shit. It's horrendous. Rip it up, start again. He said, no, we can't. We spent £1 billion. No, we can't do that. He said, well, don't keep writing code on top of code. You haven't even got a directory. So when they first wrote the first lines of code, they didn't put a directory together so that every time a first class stamp was referred to, it was referred to in the same way. People just made it up as they went along. And then they would have a collection of sales that would come up in one part that wouldn't associate itself to a collection of sales for the same item in another part. So then instead of rewriting the code that was faulty, they patched them together. And they had hundreds of thousands of these patches holding the code together. And he said, don't do that. Write a directory, rip it up, start again. With a proper team, if you let me pick everybody, I can do this in months, not years, months. We've got all the data there. We can do it. He earned his career. He ended up working in Japan. He's just come back to UK. He lives very near to me. And that's who he's dealing with. He had the power to stop his urine instantly. He'd been working on his ex-MOD, his next paratrooper. He had lots of contacts within the MOD that he'd been writing him various things and working with Brussels and all different places. It was just
That's Clint in Nick Wallace's book. It's the first word in Nick Wallace's book. Clint.
called David. He's a wonderful man, a fantastic.
Not his real name.
It's called David.
Yeah, the thing is,
Oh, sorry, go on.
It's
Go on
not
then.
about whistleblowers now. Obviously, the fact that they kept it quiet in the press, apart from maybe us and Nick Wallace, is the reason why a lot of whistleblowers didn't come forward.
It's true.
You've got to, the one who you're talking about, you said his name's out, isn't it? Yeah. He only came forward in 2021, so it's sort of
Well, he came forward, in what?
2021. He came after the GLO, sort of, if you know what I mean, if he come out in 2014, but because he hadn't seen it on the news, because he didn't know it, because at the time he just thought it was a messed up that project. He didn't actually see what had happened because he was working abroad.
Yeah, no, that's true. And
But had it
what I'm
been in the
what
mainstream, he
you've
would have
done-
seen it and he would have probably come forward
What
earlier.
would you have done in that daytime role though? If they weren't listening to you, if you're making
Yeah.
recommendations on a technical basis and people are saying, I know it's crap, but hey, it's the crap we've got. We spent £1 billion on it. We're not going to change it.
There's been something similar around calculating, I think it was women's pensions in the 1970s, 1980s. Again, if there is a sort of an IT regulator that somebody can refer the matter to, where do they go?
That's a real problem. And that's, so whistleblowers UK are trying to get an office of the whistleblower because there is no regulator overall for tech. So if you're a tech whistleblower, you've got a bunch of regulators you can go to. You can go to the CMA, Competition and Markets, you can go to the ICO, you can go to the Solicitors Regulation Authority, you can basically go to about 6 or 7. But none of them have a holistic view and they're all only interested in that little bit. And so they tend to say, well, the rest of it we're not interested in. And that's, we've got a lot of, we've had a lot of Fujitsu whistleblowers, Contact Whistleblowers UK. They're still employed. They won't go public. They wouldn't give evidence to the inquiry. They're too scared. And that's after everything that's happened and nothing has changed.
The other side of that, if you're regulated, what qualifications do you need to write code? What standard do we write code to? Where is that regulation? How do you say to somebody, you are not allowed to do that because you are not capable or you are not going to write it to the right standard or whatever? Because I don't believe that exists. I'm an electrical engineer and I know that I would be dragged over the coal over the current 18th edition if I didn't do work to the standard. And where does that change now? Software. This is so important in our lifestyle. Our lives orientate around, we interact with software millions of times a day and it makes decisions for us in certain, positions and things. And yeah, anyone can.
Question here on the.
My name is Mark Woodman. I'm a co-founder of ICT, an AI systems company. But I'm also an emeritus professor of IT. I would have been active in academia around the time that ICL and Fujitsu were building that system. And the thing that I'm very glad that Fujitsu has come into the conversation in the last 15 minutes or so, because it seems to be absent a lot of the time from the kind of public discourse of all this. But my concern is, and it goes back to a word that was used in the early part of the presentation session this evening, which referred to technologists. And you've just, I'm almost afraid to be slightly critical. You've focused on
I've got a very thick skin.
You've focused on the development of code.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for the responsibilities that management have in it.
I agree.
Nobody, you have the BBC and all the media talk about software glitches and failed software. What about the failings of the management that are responsible for that? There's lots of discussion of the post office management, but what about the discussion of the Fujitsu management and the ICL management before it?
Yeah. I mean, they didn't even have any way of logging interactions. They never even log. You could dive into my office, dial in, produce a line of data that would look as if I'd done it in my office. And they didn't even register that you've been in my system.
And that's been recorded by a QC in conversation with Deloitte, and it's in the public paper, etc. And when that was reported on the BBC, it was kind of dismissed. And then later in the program, it was summarized in a way that trivialized it.
Yeah, I agree.
It was a serious management.
For me, the most important for me to take away from this 20 years of my life is not the computer system itself. This is a computer fault, but it's a people thing. People chose. People, whether it be management at Fujitsu, management at post office, executives, this has been a long time in the making. This has come across a lot of desks. This has had a lot of people with a chance to say, whoa, hold on, what are we doing? And does it matter if it's 555? 18,000, 1 million people, or just one? It shouldn't matter, should it? But this is a people problem. This is
Absolutely.
fundamentally people.
The holes got deeper and deeper. Got past people with this. It was sorry,
Just tag team. I'm the other founder.
No, go
Nowhere as credentialed as Mark. But I've been listening to people saying it's a people problem, but actually, is it an organizational problem? It seems to me that looking at organization behavior, corporate behavior, the larger the organization, the more psychopathic it becomes.
I agree.
And not just that, but also the liability veil. When we give them limited liability, we have actors in that organization that are not responsible and can't be held responsible for its behavior. And yet we do interesting organizations.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. We'll bring Alistair in a minute just to pick up on them.
Because the government owned it as well.
Mm.
It didn't have to operate like a business, like most businesses would have gone down the way it behaved, but because I had the government bailing it out and actually helping it cover up. It's the
Bring
only way
Alistair
it
in a
got
minute
through.
on your point on standards, but I was reflecting this morning, came down from Yorkshire. The first train we got was Northern Trains, and I'm sure you've all seen the story in the last few weeks about the student who was prosecuted for £1.75 underpayment, who actually tried to pay his fare. Yeah, he got caught by the terms and conditions that said you don't get a discount if the fare is less than £12 before 9 o'clock on a morning. And he bought it, and the system allowed him to buy an anytime ticket, and the conductor kind of didn't accept his underpayment of £1.75, actually wrote him the thing, and there was nothing this lad could do to stop that process. And so when you say it's a people problem, it absolutely is, because I can't think that if I was that conductor, I'd be thinking, what? You just say, well, next time know the rules. Or if you were the legal person who wrote those terms and conditions, or if you were the accountant who said, well, the de minimis £12 or what have you. Or if you were the person in the admin office who actually saw that when it came through. And then when it came through, there's thousands of these people that have been prosecuted, old people with their senior rail cards who didn't know the detailed terms.
In real terms, the business.
But
had
the
a
business
responsibility
culture,
as well.
the business culture, and why do good ordinary people do bad things like that?
Well,
Why
quite often people do things that aren't particularly bad, but are taken to be bad by people that are just trying to do things not that are even bad, but just trying to do. I heard a litigation tell me that he had a responsibility to his client more over than anything. That's not true. But people use that as a caveat to do whatever it is that the client wants. And again, it's probably similar to management structure in an IT company. You can do whatever you like. You get managed however you get managed. But at the end of the day, if you know that you're interacting with software and you're changing figures and people having real problems, real problems, you might not know about the personal side of it. But you do know that that's going to interact. And on one particular occasion, a really good friend of mine, Mike Woodkin, was invited to Fujitsu. He went down into the cellar, which was where the live feed was, so they could interact live with other people's offices. And one of the guys, very clever, jumped onto the system, into an office, and changed the foreign exchange figure in the office to show how clever he was, which was great. And then he went, well, I better change that back because he wrote balance tonight. Who knew? The person knew. It shouldn't take 20 years to fight.
And so Michael Rudkin, when that happened,
Yes.
he kicked up a fuss about it. And then the next day, auditors turned up at his post office and found a huge loss. And he lost his post office. That's how bad.
And then they denied.
And then his wife was prosecuted because he was the.
Just want to bring Alistair in, because people might have got a sense from Alistair's opening comments there about the passion for professionalism in IT and some of the things you said about the quality and the standards, and we've been talking about a little bit there about the kind of standards of the registration. But I've got a question for you, Alistair. Some of the other professions, you've said, well-established professions, the legal, the accountancy world, were very mature, with codes of conduct, with disciplinary committees and all that kind of stuff. But yet still, people who are in there behaved in certain ways. And if you think that relatively the IT profession is way behind that in terms of that, what are the kind of things that are in your I know you think an awful lot about professionalism and how can improve. How does IT catch up or start catching up?
Well, I think for me, a significant part is around that chartered and professional registration piece. It goes back as well to unpacking what we mean by professional. We bandy that around quite a bit. If you look at the word professional, look at etymologically at it, the word, there is a verb profess in there. The archaic use of that was to profess to a rule, which the monastic communities of the Middle Ages would actually as to the rule of St. Benedict. I think for professions, the word professional actually comes from the idea of professing or avowing yourself to a particular, to serve the public interest, to serve under a code of conduct. So I think that is fundamentally important. But actually, I don't think the people in IT particularly understand that. If you look at it, BCS is 1/10 of the industry. So 9/10 work in IT, and I would suggest if you take my definition of professional, are actually not acting professionally, let alone being registered as being competent and ethical. And I think that is what we've got to sort of reboot it completely and get there very, very quickly. And I think chartered registration is the way, and professional registrations as well. I think really important.
Okay, question there.
Hi. At what point or what event do you think causes the people who've been acting badly to have an epiphany that, oh, I'm the bad guy? Like when does that realization occur?
With the post office, I'm afraid. I mean, if you look at the schemes now, the one that the post office run to offer redress is being used by people from the post office that be actively part of the cover-up. You know, they've made it as difficult as possible to navigate. They know that it's victims that have been traumatized by the whole process and the whole journey to the redress side, and they make it horrific. One of my law victims is currently going through the 5th medical exam because 4 previous ones, 3 of which were with specialists that were handed to her by the post office. So these are chosen by the post office. They didn't like the outcome because they all said the same thing, which was the same as her original specialist, which was that the medical issue that she has was caused by the extreme stress of going to prison. He's now going through the 5th version of that. What right-minded person would need a 5th opinion for the same thing, having had 4 opinions that are all the same? So I don't think there's been an epiphany. I don't think anybody's actually, even now, I think that they think we're all guilty and we were just looking. Seriously, I really do, honestly.
Yeah. So who you are, by the way?
Yes, sure. My name's Ibrahim. I'm connected with you both on LinkedIn, which I'm not happy about, but I'm proud of to be for hearing your story. The thing that I'm very frustrated with at this time now is there's a heavy-handedness within various industry, whether it be within social housing, whether it be in the post office scandal, as you guys have rightly exposed, in other industries, and I'm fed up with it now. Will you please influence as much as you can with the legal profession, the expression of the thugs in suits that exist in this, because those are the ones that are protecting it. And I went to the Oxford Law Conference. I shook Rob Wilmington's hand and I said, thank you so much for what you did. A few months before I met Ian Henderson, I shook his hand and I thanked him for what he did. Can you please do something? Because, you know, otherwise, as you rightly expressed, the train issue with £1.20 turned into £340, 25 grand, 321 grand.
There's something
out of order.
accountability.
It is, yeah.
As a child in the 70s, my father of 7 children, would throw us all in the back of a car and take us to a country pub. He'd have a few pints and then he'd drive us home again. It was illegal to drive whilst drinking. You know, we would have been over the limit. Nobody cared. Nobody cared. By the 80s, it changed. By the 90s, people were prosecuted and the licenses would change. Until there's accountability, until somebody is held accountable, nobody will change. They'll keep making the non-commercial decision because it's easy. And as long as it's easy and they're all okay and they all earn a few quid, it's fine. It's to be accountable. And people need to be heard. People need to be listened to, and people need to change.
And I think
The only thing is,
And I think the point that you raised right at the end about reputation, that's all I care about, is reputation. And that is literally all I see is like some of these social housing magazines protecting one of them, protecting the reputation of this big housing association, whereas the other one did something a little bit more. And then you get ITV come out and then they expose it. And then you've then got the housing associations going back to it. And that's what I get frustrated with it. And what you've exposed is the reputation factor. And that needs to be get it out, because once you've then put ethics above reputation, you'll only then see it.
well, I tell you, people talk about being able to hit hard, don't they? You know, like civil lawyers, smash them, do whatever you have to do to win. Let's try doing the right thing. Yeah, because right down at the end of that line, it's people like me.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, we've got probably a couple more questions. We're going to finish at 8 o'clock. Not open to you in a second. Say who you are.
Say very quickly that when we get a terrorist incident, politicians and people call it an attack on our democratic values and our democratic way of life. This doesn't really fall short of that at all. It's just as much an attack on our democratic values. And it's more than just technical accountability, it's moral accountability. It's just, isn't that, I don't know how we can do it, but
We need to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the worst thing in the world is to have no conduit, no way of talking, whether that's through registration, whether that's through, you know, having an office of whistleblowers, or whether that's through just being able to listen to people in your roles in work, whatever you do, wherever you work, to listen to people's issues and try and help and try and be open. It's not any more difficult than that. You know, we don't have to make it hard.
Long-standing BCS council member over many years. Fire away.
Many years ago, I used to work for the office IT department in Farnborough.
Maybe you shouldn't have declared that.
You weren't involved in the captures.
Okay.
I don't remember the name of the lady who was in charge of the whole IT department. But quite a lot of people sitting here and those on the telecom line, they are interested to find out the root cause of problem from the IT design point of view. Now, one question I have is that was the system designed in such a way to produce a log of a daily transaction and send it to post office headquarters?
That's how it worked.
It
So
was.
the problem, as I see it, I might not be correct, but this is how I evaluate it, is that every day, every transaction would be packaged together in information packets and sent down to two, I think there's a northern and a southern, two IT places where it would be stored. And that lasts for 28 days, and then after 28 days, it is overwritten. So that's an ongoing thing. The problem with the system is that to extricate that, you need to pay Fujitsu money. Post office didn't want to do that. And it was really easy because our contract said any deficits we were liable for. Why pay Fujitsu money? Let's just take you to court and produce a contract and say, pay us your money.
They get, because it was going straight to the post office system, the Horizon. You couldn't check, could you? You didn't have anything to check.
There was lots of
In the old
transactions
days,
you
they
couldn't
used the
check,
books,
yeah.
but they couldn't really check. They could only check in the post office. The post office would pay, because often you wouldn't find out until a while after it happened.
It would be at the
You'd have-
balance that
you'd
you'd
have to
find
pay
anything.
Fujitsu.
So when you get to the end of the week, you would declare your internal stock in the office. That would be squared down to Chesterfield or Wigan or somewhere. And that would be compared with the transactions that they held on account. And that would then be compared to what they thought your cash account would be. And then it would just square the cash account that they've got and compare it to what you've got. And if you're either a positive or a negative or a balance. And if you got a negative, if you had a negative, the underpinnings of that document you couldn't see. you could ask for.
We'll draw close now to the question. Oh, you got one more question?
No, I haven't, but I know there are some online questions.
Probably one, but because it's
All right, okay.
the last two
Let's
questions.
take the last couple of questions then.
Just to-
Okay. Oh, so Freddie Quack. Hello, Freddie. Freddie said, read it. Oh, now that's gone. It's an IT system, my God. What's it doing to me? I can't see Freddie. Disappeared. I can see Desmond. Desmond has asked one. Desmond has said, did the people making the changes actually be classified as technical or IT professional? It seems some of the problem was caused by people handling the helpline. The problem seemed to relate to the help desk that was able to book transactions as if it was the post office.
No, there was two levels to the helpline. So there was level one, which would deal with the first call that you made. They would then go over everything that you do for a balance usually. So you'd just go through the figures that you put in and how you put them in and all the sort of technical side of the front office. And then there was a more technical second level, which would be able to look at individual problems and answer questions. The only problem with that is to get the right person to take that on is quite difficult. And
Was there not three?
that would be the further at
The
Fujitsu.
SEC. Oh, that was
yeah.
Fujitsu.
So Fujitsu then would be involved in anything that became a recurring problem.
And
So if
that's-
they saw the same thing being tagged on to the same number, then they would look at it.
And that's where Richard's role worked,
That's
wasn't it? Yeah.
And they're the ones that.
They were the most technical.
Okay, I've got a final question from Freddie, and if anybody knows Freddie, the human aspect of this question will come through. So Freddie has asked that this issue affects people closest to the postmasters as well. How would Lee advise on explaining and supporting the people around him? Do you tell or not tell them? I can't read the rest of the question, but I think we get your drift.
We're finding in our group, or we have found in our group, that people have actually gone to the grave without ever telling the family.
Wow.
So the family now are trying to pick up pieces of what went on and how that happened and trying to understand why they felt so alien, so alone, not to be able to discuss it with their families. For me, I wish I could have protected them more.
Okay, all right. So, yeah, I mean, the kind of humility and humanity that you've shown there, Lee, and you and Lisa is just absolutely incredible. And the resilience that Carl over many years has shown us. I'm sure it's a northeastern trait, but that's what it is. But thank you so much for that.
Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Alistair, and thanks especially to Carl and to Lee. We're finished now for the live part evening. So people online, I'll be logging you off in a moment. People here in the room, welcome to stay. There should be some, I believe, pizza and drinks down in the main room again. So there's a chance to network, chat a bit. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to join us at the ethics group AGM and meeting for December, we'll have Whistleblowers UK talking to us about the issues of whistleblowing and the IT professional. And there's opportunities as well, the ethics group working on in the coming weeks. So thanks again to everybody. Let's finish with, thank again, especially to Cal and Lee here. And please about Lisa here as well tonight. So if you want to have a chat with them personally over the drinks and pizza, please do so. Thanks, everybody.